you all for joining us here. Oh, am I still sharing screen? Okay, awesome. Apologies. Bit of technical difficulties this evening. Always seems to happen, but thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you coming online during your half-term holiday here to come and see more about the webinar, learn about teaching in Australia. I am so sorry. I am trying to share a screen. I'm going to pause for a minute, and it is glitching on my end for just 2 seconds here. Try that one more time. Here we go. There we are. Now it's working on my end. Perfect. Okay. So we'll kick things off here, though. We'll get into the swing of things. Thank you all for joining us. Just as a quick introduction to say hello, my name is Corey. I am part of the Global Opportunities team. I am based in rainy Wales. I am in the Newport office here, but I've been on the global team for just about 2 years now, supporting educators making the move over to Australia and New Zealand. I'm originally from Canada myself. I've lived in the US and now in the UK. I was also a teaching assistant through ANZUK in both Bristol and in Cardiff. So I have some experience on both sides of the experience here. But yeah, so very excited to speak with you about opportunities in Australia today.
And I'm Ella. I am also part of the Global Opportunities team. I've only been with the company, well, so only, it's coming up to 5 months now. Gosh, that's flying by, which is super exciting. I myself have lived and worked and taught in America, so I have firsthand experience of what it can be like to uproot your life to another country to start teaching, just as Corey. And yeah, I absolutely love sort of giving you guys a chance to experience the wonders of teaching and traveling and living abroad.
Amazing, yeah. And we're both part of a wider global team, but we both do specifically speak with educators, mostly from Ireland, making the transition over. So that's why we're having this conversation with you today. So let you take this one, Ella.
Yes, absolutely. So what you guys can see here is a nice extensive list of everything we'll be covering today. Don't worry, obviously you guys will get a recording of this afterwards, so don't panic if you're like, oh my goodness, this is so much stuff. You'll be able to watch it back at your leisure. But the basics of what we're going to go over today is just introducing ourselves a little bit more, introducing ANZ UK more, so you guys understand who we are, what we do, and discussing why we suggest that you move overseas, along with the requirements to teach abroad, specifically in Australia, along with any sort of visa things, and sort of really getting into the depths of the different areas you could live, what you can do, and just breaking down the process for you so that it doesn't feel quite so overwhelming and scary, and giving you guys a strong idea of what it is that you'll be embarking on when you head off to Australia. And then obviously, as always, we'll make sure that we have time for any questions at the end. So if you do have any questions popping up at any point, do pop them in the chat and we will do our best to answer all the questions at the end.
Amazing. Awesome. So a bit of an introduction to ANZ UK and who we are as a company. ANZ UK was actually founded by educators. Our CEO, Dan Mundy, made the transition from Australia over to London and realized that there was a bit of a gap there. There's support that needed to be had, and he wanted to be the one to provide that support. So we have been operating for 20 years now, just over 21. We started in 2004. We now have over 400 staff globally. We have offices in, obviously in the UK, but also in Australia, New Zealand, in the US. We also support educators coming from Canada to the UK and Australia. And we really do have quite an extensive network within the global team and sending educators back and forth to a bunch of different locations. So we're very lucky to be working in a very global company. And we really help with the kind of 360 side of things. So we try and make sure that you are supported before you go. That's why we're based in the same time zone as you, as well as helping you out when you arrive and helping you come back as well. So lots of well-rounded support. In terms of our promise and what we kind of guarantee for you, we first of all do always live by our Be Great values. So you can see what Be Great stands for underneath there. We all have our favorite values, but we all try and live and breathe all of those. And that's across the company as well. So we really try to hone in on making sure that this is a up-to-date company, that we're always kind of living and breathing the growth and the belief of what we do, so that we can provide that exceptional experience for our educators. That is kind of our motto, is the right educator, right place, right time. And we really want to make sure that when we're having these conversations with you, we are looking at what you specifically have for your move, for your qualifications, what it is that you're looking for your career, and make sure that it is the right opportunity for you.
Absolutely. And this is always my favorite part, which is why teach abroad. I mean, you guys are all on this webinar, so I'm assuming there's at least some inkling of wanting to head out to somewhere else, to greener pastures, if you will. And I think there are so many different reasons. Everyone you speak to will have a different reason why they love teaching abroad or traveling abroad in any capacity. Some of the ones that we see the most, and I think all of us aligned with in the global company, is personal growth is always a massive one. This is an opportunity for you to step out of your comfort zones, develop more cultural awareness, and just experience living in another country whilst being paid, which is always a bonus. It's also a great opportunity for career development, especially working alongside ANZ UK. We're here to support you, whether you're wanting to develop your career or you're just wanting to go out and have a bit of fun. We're able to support you through the process, and we'll really delve into a bit more detail with that later on. But it's also great for finances, especially traveling to Australia. I will tell you that for free. But it's also a great way to just get yourself a bit of experience and stand out from the crowd in what is becoming an increasingly competitive market. And then at the end of the day, it's also life experience. I know from my personal experience, I wouldn't be who I am. That sounds so cheesy as I'm saying it, but I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for the travel that I did, and it wasn't for the teaching abroad that I did. Being immersed in that culture and really learning who I was as a person and developing a community within the expat community I was in really enhanced me as a person. And I think that, you know, by you guys taking this leap, you will find out things about yourself that you'd never otherwise know.
Amazing, yeah. I think all of us who've had experiences abroad can speak to that as well, so that's amazing. Brilliant. So we'll get into some of the admin and the things to expect about making this kind of transition. So first things first, with any kind of country that you are going to live in, you have to think about working rights and getting your visa sorted. Most of our educators do travel on that 417 working holiday visa. It's probably the one that you're seeing all your friends go to Australia on. It's very, very popular, very, very accessible. Essentially, if you're between the ages of 18 to 35 and you hold an Irish passport, you can get that visa. It's very, very quick to be processed as well. So a really handy one to just get you in the door and over to Australia. If you do happen to have access to a UK passport, we do recommend putting it to use. It's a great way to be able to extend your working rights, because they have actually opened up the free trade agreement for the UK passport, so you can stay for up to 3 years in Australia without having to do any of the specified regional work. Whereas if you're going on an Irish passport, there are 88 days of regional work that you would have to do if you wanted to access the second year on that visa. Or you can just go for one. You can just apply for it outright, head over to Australia for a year and come home. But we will talk a little bit more about that specified work in a moment here. The other options, of course, would be the skilled worker visas. There's a few different options, like the 189 and the 190. Those are permanent residency visas, essentially. So if you are going on one of those, it's because you have dependents with you, or because you want this to be the move. It is going to be a long-term journey for you. You can stay for 4 to 5 years on those visas, and they also do legal citizenship if you wanted to stay permanently as well. Or of course, if you happen to have an Australian or New Zealand passport, put it to use. You probably already know that, but just like to put it out there as well. In terms of the qualifications, most of the qualifications that we do see come out of Ireland are easily transferable over to the Australian requirements. So there's not too much to worry about that way. Essentially, they do require that you have a minimum of 4 years of higher education behind you, and at least 1 year has to be dedicated towards education specifically. So that can look like a 3 or 4 years long bachelor degree and a PGCE, or a 2-year master's degree on top, or a 4-year bachelor's of education. All of those are fine. Just do be aware, some of the ones we do see come up occasionally that might have a few more kind of bumps in the road are things like IPGCEs. So if you did happen to study through the UK while teaching in Dubai or something like that, we might have to look into those a little bit further, because Australia is just a little bit curious about those ones, essentially. With all of these qualifications, they would have to be approved by the teacher registration boards across Australia. So whichever state you're going to be living in has to approve those qualifications. We'll dive into that a little bit later on as well, just to get into the nitty-gritty. But for teaching assistants, you do not have to have a teaching registration, so don't worry about that as well.
And now comes the fun bit that I'm sure all of you have heard in some way, shape, or form, which is the regional work. And I want to start off by saying it's not what it used to be. So don't worry, you don't have to go out and start picking fruit in a farm in the middle of Australia. But I will break it down here for you. So what you've probably heard, and is absolutely true, you do need, if you are on an Irish passport, 88 days of regional work to be able to access your second year of your working holiday visa. This is part of the reason why we say if you do have access to a British passport, it can just be easier. It just means you don't have to do it due to the free trade agreements. But if you don't, it's no worries. It's totally normal, and we are more than able to help you still. So the big thing that I always like to point out with the regional work is the fact that you have to complete your 88 days before the end of your first year. That's not to say you have to do 88 days all in one go, but you do have to just be aware of it. I've seen some people do a couple of days at a time somewhere. I've seen people just go out for a couple of months and do it. It's totally up to you. We can help you figure out what's best for you, but it must be completed through a recognized regional employer. Yet again, something we can help with. We have lists. We will be able to make sure that you know what you're doing, basically. And it also doesn't have to be just one. So yet again, in that same fashion, you can kind of break it up with different employers if you want. So like we say, if you have access to that UK passport, you can stay up for up to 3 years without the regional work. The same can be said if you want to apply for a skilled worker visa. You don't have to do it then, or a sponsorship, which is only available for certain secondary subjects in SEM, and it will be primarily in Melbourne and the surrounding areas. So I would say don't bank on the sponsorship. It's definitely something we can talk about, but do keep in mind that there are ways to work around it should you not want to take that route. That being said, as well, I always say, and a big thing that I think is really important to think, if you are 99% sure you're only staying for a year, but you've got that 1% that says, I don't know, I might stay, do your regional work. The reason I say that is once you leave the country, or once you complete that 1 year, you can no longer do your regional work, so you won't have access to that second year. So if you're even just on the fence, just considering it, I'd say it doesn't hurt to give it a go, get it covered. But yet again, something we can talk through in that individual sort of one-to-one setting to really find out what's best for you. But this is just to give you guys a bit of an overview of the situation.
Amazing. And we do have, resources around this as well. Like Ella was saying, we have a guide to extending your working rights, which does break down the specified work. There's a webinar recording specifically for that information. There is information on the skilled worker visas if you want to extend your working rights that way, and a few other kind of webinars and things to give you more of an idea of what to expect from those different visas. So in terms of the actual work options, so you've gotten your visa, you've gotten your teaching registration, and we're going to get you out to Australia. What can you expect to be teaching? How we're going to teach? Most of our international educators do start out with what's called CRT, which is casual relief teaching. Most people from Ireland would kind of know that as substitute teaching or supply teaching, but the beauty of it is that it's all done through ANZUK UK, so we're going to be the ones supporting you with actually finding the work as well. It gets to be a little bit more custom to you and maybe the subjects that you're looking for, the age range, or whatever it is that you have a particular fondness for. The starting rate for teaching as a CRT for like a primary or a secondary teacher is a minimum rate of 398 Australian dollars a day. And it goes up with years of experience as well. So you can, expect more when you've got 3 years under your belt versus fresh out of school. But that's kind of like any, pay rate that you would have in Ireland as well. If you are an early childhood educator, the minimum rate is $34 an hour, but that also depends on the level of education that you hold. So that is kind of for a certificate 3-level educator, which is kind of the lowest early childhood qualification in Australia. Now, with the CRT, you can have up to 5 days of work per week. It does not have to be really hit and miss. We can definitely get you consistent work, and we'll talk about the locations in which you can find those opportunities as well. We do have, account managers in Australia who would be the ones actually getting you the work. They're going to do all the matchmaking behind the scenes, and they're going to be able to call you up and tell you all about these roles so that you have the opportunity to really talk it through and make up your mind before making any decisions. But we also do have a ready to work app that allows you to control your availability. So if you get there and you say, you know what, the weather looks really great on Friday and I'm not booked in at a school, I want to go to the beach instead, you can just book yourself off, and that way we know not to bother you that day and let you enjoy your day off, which is great. A lot of people do use CRT as a great way to kind of do some networking. Really good way to just dip your toe in the water, get to know a few of the different schools. And sometimes those schools will call us back and say, you know what, this educator is fantastic. We want to have them back. And it can turn into, a familiar face in that school, or you could be there on a long-term booking, or it could even turn into one of those contract roles. But it's a really good way to just try new things. You're over in Australia. Why not see some different types of settings while you're there as well? You can have a little bit more of a lighter workload so that you can really just clock off at the end of the day and do whatever you want with the rest of your afternoon. So it's really fantastic to be able to just ease back into the fun side of teaching, really. Now, on the flip side with the contracts there, we do also have, obviously, contract opportunities available. We do have a permanent opportunities team, and actually one of our global team members specifically focuses on finding contracts before you do arrive in Australia. And they can really line up a lot of interviews, a lot of opportunities, talk through those different types of settings that they do have connections with and contracts available at. This is mostly focused at the secondary teacher level. There are a lot of contracts that we can arrange before you actually get there if you are a secondary or an SEN teacher. But if you are a primary teacher wanting contracts as well, we can look into that a little bit further and have more of a one-to-one conversation with you on those. But it kind of just depends on how open-minded you are. The visa that you're on can sometimes impact this, but they are available for working holiday visa holders and for skilled worker visas as well.
So now we'll go a little bit more into the ins and outs of some of the places that you may have heard of or wanted to know a little bit more about before moving over. So our two most popular options are Victoria and New South Wales states. That is Melbourne and Sydney. We find these are really, really popular locations, especially for people who are really wanting that expat community feel. There's a real strong Irish community out in both of them, which is fantastic. The wonderful thing about both of these states as well is there are so many CRT roles for early childhood, primary, secondary, and SEN. If you are interested in doing TA work, I would recommend, not recommend, you're going to Victoria. That's where you're going to want to go because realistically, that's where we can support you the best. That's honestly not a bad thing. Melbourne, I think in our team is probably the favourite place. We all love Melbourne, so you are not missing out, promise you. When it comes to more permanent and contract roles, yet again, Victoria and New South Wales both have so much opportunity across the board with their early childhood, primary, secondary, SEN. You have your pick. So it's wonderful. Whatever you are qualified in, we are able to support with is basically what we're saying. The nice thing as well is there are such thing as regional contracts. So regional contracts are not in your sort of metro areas. They are going to be more out into the wilderness, so to speak. That's not to say there's going to be more spiders. Don't worry. I wouldn't go if there were. You'll be fine. But it does often come with other kinds of interesting developments. So that can be, you can have children with different needs, different settings. These schools are often quite rural, and sometimes because of that, they will offer a little bit of a pay incentive to head on out there as well. But they're a fantastic opportunity to see like true rural Australia life as opposed to that metropolitan life. But if you do decide to go into the metropolitan, both Melbourne and Sydney have great public transport, and they are just honestly the best locations for educators on working holiday visas. Both states are super used to it. It's very, very common, and they don't blink an eye at it. I will say, if you are going to either of these states, you will almost certainly have heard of St Kilda, Coogee, or Bondi. And as much as these are fantastic areas, we would highly recommend avoiding moving to those areas. The big reason is the public transport in these areas is not great, and also rent is often a little bit pricier. So if you're looking to go to these areas, I'd say look just outside, somewhere where you can go visit for a day if you really want to, but you're somewhere a little bit more connected that's going to make your life a little bit easier when it comes to getting yourself to work.
Awesome. Yeah, I know we have a lot of Irish educators calling it County Coogee at this point. So if that tells you anything, if you are looking a little bit further afield, if Sydney and Melbourne are a little bit too popular for you and you want to try something different, we do also have opportunities in Perth in Western Australia, in Adelaide in South Australia, and in Brisbane in Queensland. There are only casual roles for early childhood educators in these locations, so please be aware that there is not that kind of flexibility for the short-term kind of opportunities in any of those states, just because the government runs a lot of programs out there, so we really only have access to contracts, and it's not quite the same for international educators going to those locations. However, for the permanent and contract roles, we do have opportunities in early childhood, secondary, and in SEN. Mostly focused on secondary side, but we are trying to start to break into the primary side in all of those locations. So if you are a primary educator and you are really keen on any of those locations, do still let us know, because we can try and arrange some things directly with the team as well. If you are going to metropolitan Brisbane, if you're going to be in that city and in the kind of surrounding locations, that's the best place to be in Queensland, because there is so much opportunity there. I know a lot of people look at Sunshine or Gold Coast, but obviously, it's desired for a reason. There's a lot of even Australians who want to move to those locations. So it can be really, really competitive. We're starting to get a little bit more going in the Gold Coast, but we still just say try and stick to the Brisbane area. You're going to be better off for work there. There's also those opportunities within the kind of metropolitan Adelaide and slightly more regional. So if you wanted to go a little further afield, great place to start as well. And Perth is becoming more and more popular. We're getting more opportunities that way. We're trying to start to maybe get some shorter term opportunities as well. So do speak to us about it if you are interested in Perth and want something other than a contract. With those locations, they all do have parts of, the transportation that are great, and there's other parts of the city that maybe aren't as good. So it is recommended, if you're going to be kind of outside of the city or in the outer suburbs, we would recommend having a car for those types of locations. It's not like Melbourne or Sydney where you can rely off the trains all the time, but it just depends on how close you are to the schools that you're working in.
And I know this slide has a lot of information on it, but don't worry. This is a pause and read at your leisure if you are rewatching this back, but I am going to go through this as well. So here you will see all the different types of teaching registrations needed across Australia. We figure it's easier for you to be able to see them, compare them, than having to flip through slides. It just makes life a little easier for you. So a big thing to notice, and it's always my first port of call when we're looking at all the different options, if you're really undecided and teaching registration is going to be the one that helps you pick. I will point out that New South Wales, so that is Sydney, is the only one that you have to process once you have arrived in Sydney. So if you are moving to Sydney and you are looking for your teaching registration, you have to wait until you arrive. Now, don't worry, we can help you figure out that whole process. You're not left unattended at any point, but it is something to take into consideration. Every single state, as you can see, has wildly different options and different prices, different requirements, but that's fine. Yet again, that's the beauty of going through an agency. That's what we're here to walk you through. We do this day in, day out. We can help you as best we can. You'll also notice, I'll start from the top, early childhood. So early childhood has what we call a CEQA, and that means if you're an early childhood educator, you have one registration that you take to find out your classification. So you heard us talking about classifications. If you're teaching in early childhood, they break it up to 3 classifications, and you can apply for that up to a year before your arrival. So that's plenty of time to figure out where you'll be assessed at, what your journey is going to look like. It does take about 8 weeks to process, but it only costs 129 Australian dollars. So it's not a particularly pricey one, which is lovely. And it gives you plenty of time to figure out what you want to do with your journey. When it gets to Melbourne, which is Victoria, you're looking at a VIT. This one you can apply for up to 3 months before arrival. Often takes about 4 to 6 weeks to process, and it costs about 191 Australian dollars. Like I mentioned with Sydney and New South Wales, you have to have the NESA, which you have to apply from New South Wales, and that does take up to 8 weeks to process. So 4 to 8 weeks, and it costs 190 Australian dollars. Nice thing is, though, if you are thinking about that regional work, that is a fantastic time to get some of that done under your belt, because then you're earning the money and you're ticking that bit of your visa for the next year off. So it can actually be a really beneficial thing if used correctly. When you're looking at Western Australia, we have the TRBWA. These acronyms,
They
guys, we
love
love
their
them.
acronyms.
Love them, especially for the dyslexic over here. That's like, so I'm sorry if I get them wrong. Go with what's on the screen, not necessarily what comes out of my mouth when it comes to these acronyms. But we can apply for those about 6 months before arrival, and it takes up to 10 weeks to process. It's a little bit more on the pricier side as well, with that being our most pricey at 473 Australian dollars. So for Queensland, we have our QCT, nice simple acronym. We love it. And that you can apply for 6 months before arrival, and it takes up to 12 weeks to process. Costs about 305 Australian dollars, but like we say, it's another one that you can do before you arrive. And then we come to South Australia, which is the TRBSA, which you can apply for 6 months before arrival, but you have to be aware you must send it by post, because they still like their snail mail out there. So you have to send it by post, and it takes up to 6 weeks to process. This is from when it arrives. So do keep that in mind. And that costs 206 Australian dollars. Now, that's a lot of words. That's a lot of facts. Don't worry. This is the sort of thing we're here to help with, to help you process through. And this is why we always say it's always good to start those initial calls with us as soon as you've got that inkling, because we will go through the process of what you do to work with us and alongside us throughout your process. But I do always say, once you're aware that you're wanting to go, get those calls booked in, and we can make sure that we're sort of just setting you up for success, really.
And like Ella was saying as well, we actually have a lot of resources around all of these registrations. So for every state, there is a blog that breaks down what you need for qualification documents, what you need for identity documents, when you can apply, the links to the website, everything you need to know is in those blogs. So do speak with us about it, and we can kind of sort you out and give you a better idea of the timeline and everything to expect. And if you do want to go to multiple states, that's also an option. They do have what's called mutual recognition. So you can be registered in one state and then transfer over to another state later on as well. And it speeds up the process for you. So there's plenty of options. But again, just chat with us about your locations, what you're wanting to do that way, the long-term kind of plan, and we'll help you out from there, okay? Right. Now, as part of that process for each of those state registrations, they do require police checks. Now, this is not something that you need to go and do tomorrow. This is just something we want to make you aware of. The police checks are the most time-sensitive part of any application for Australia, so don't be getting them just yet. But just so that you are aware, most educators do try and apply for a Garda police certificate just to start out with. The Garda have been changing processes though, so it's just something to be aware of that they are only trying to permit those for EU work purposes and not for Australia. Some stations might grant them, some stations might say actually you still need it for your visa as well, or whatever the case might be, so they might be able to help you out. And if you want to give it a go, it's a fairly straightforward process. You fill out the form and include your identity documents, and you can even submit it online now. It could take up to 2 to 3 weeks, though, for the guards to come back to you with either an approval or to tell you that they actually cannot grant that for you. So if you want to try that one out and go through the guards, it's not going to be your Garda vetting. It would be a standard police certificate. If they ask you to do some other kind of form, that's not the right one, just the police certificate. But that's up to you if you want to give that a go, or just go with the AIS International. So AIS International is a third party that is based in Australia, but they have connections with each of the teaching registration boards in Australia as well. They are an approved third-party provider, so they are able to get you an Irish police certificate that the teaching boards do recognize, essentially. It's an entirely online process. It's actually really straightforward. It only takes you about 10 to 14 days to get that one back via email, so it's quite quick as well. Obviously, permitting things like holidays and things like that, it might be a little bit longer. It does have a fee though, so it's currently at 140 Australian dollars to apply, which is I think 80, 85 euro, but then at least you know that it is definitely going to be granted to you and it is definitely going to be approved by the teaching boards in Australia. So don't do it just yet, but just be aware of what your options are. I will carry on here with the calendar year as well. When is the best time for you to head over to Australia? Now, one thing I do want to make a note of as well, if you are currently a university student, if you're finishing up your bachelor's degree or your master's, and you're not quite sure when's going to work best for you, just be aware that Australia does not require that you have your Joy Head finished. If you want to graduate and head off straight to Australia right away, absolutely we can help you. Australia won't really take that part into account. But I do believe that the Joy Head has to be completed within, I think it's about 3 years of graduating from your degree. So if you are intending to come home and continue working as an educator in Ireland, and you're not sure if you're going to be there for a year or 2 years or maybe a bit longer, it is a good idea to get your Joy Head finished before you do go off to Australia. It's only about 200 hours. Might as well get it done, cleared and out of the way, and then we can start planning for your trip to Australia while you're completing that. Now, the academic year in Australia is it's just kicked off. It starts at the end of January, very early February, depending on the calendar year. And term one, as much as people think I need to be there for the start of the academic year to get those working opportunities, it's a good time to go. It's nothing wrong with going this time of year, but it's not the only time of year to arrive. We do find that with the casual opportunities, they are a bit quiet to start. So that's something to be aware of as well. You're going to be enjoying the amazing sunny weather, but the work is not really going to pick up until about March. We can usually see that they're going to be between 2 to 4 days of work per week, maybe 5 if it's kind of throughout March, depends how the year is going. So it's a little bit slower than you would see later on in the year. If you are wanting a contract, though, especially if you're going on a skilled worker visa and you want a year-long contract, or you are a secondary teacher who wants to kick off the year strong, it's a great time to get there to be able to start teaching straight away. Term 2, so between April and June, is a fantastic time to go, and I'm actually going to pair that up with term 3 as well, which is July through September. Those are our 2 busiest times of year. That's when it is winter in Australia, and as you know from over here as well, winter is when you're going to get the most kind of illness, people are going on holidays, things like that. They're just trying to escape the cold weather. So you are going to have more of those opportunities. And we do usually see that if you're wanting that casual work, this is when you're going to get a full 5 days of work per week. So it's a great time to be out there, great time to be teaching. Most educators do tend to arrive in term 3 because obviously we wrap up with the school year here in late May, throughout June, depends if you're a secondary or primary teacher. And then if you want to pack your bags and head straight off to Australia, it's a brilliant time to get there, especially if you can get there for July and August. Essentially the best time of year to start networking because you're going to be busy. You're going to be out to a bunch of different schools and they're going to want to keep you on because they already know your lovely face. They want to have familiarity in the school, so they will bring you back out for slower terms as well, which could be more like term 4. So term 4 is October through December. Still a great time to arrive if you're going to get there in kind of late September, early October. But we do say that if you are going to wait until about November time to arrive, there might be less work available. The kind of December time, the last 2 to 3 weeks of the year, tends to be quite quiet. It's exam season. Everybody's kind of just finishing up the school year and holding on for summer. So there is not too much work available, but if you do start at a time like October, the consistency really can carry through to the end of the year, which is fantastic. That is also interview season. So if you are wanting to get a contract, that's a great time to be out there, actually getting to see the schools in person. We can line up those interviews for you during that time so that you can be busy all of the next academic year.
And you have probably heard us say the word resources so many times during this webinar that you're rolling your eyes at us by this point. But I think that it's so important to touch on it again because one of the benefits of coming through ANZ UK is the resources we offer. So we've spoken a little bit about state registration blogs. So this will be for every single individual state teaching registration. We have a specified blog that will walk you through the process. We have area guides. If you're sort of not sure about where in Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane you're wanting to live, we've got a guide to help you through it. We have an entire information pack just about teaching in Australia and just running you through all the information you might need. We have monthly webinars similar to this one that focus on different themes every month, and you can rewatch them as well. So, you know, we've got so many different options for you to watch for visuals. We have in-person events. So it's not just online stuff. We have, I think recently here in the UK, we just had a departure and arrivals event in the beginning of this month that was fantastic. It was like a pub quiz. I know Melbourne, I think, had a coffee meetup recently, I believe. There's so many different events that we support that kind of community feel as well. So you're never left alone if you don't want to be. And like Corey has mentioned, we do 360 support. So it's not only getting you out to Australia, it's helping you all along the way, making sure someone's there constantly, pretty much 24/7 realistically, and also bringing you back. So if you're interested in heading out to New Zealand after or to the UK afterwards, we do have opportunities in those as well that we can keep finding you work and keep you traveling as long as your heart desires.
Amazing. And that Teach in Australia info pack is a bit of a hidden gem. Not a lot of people look through that one as much as you can, but there are so many resources in there for life admin, for you and friends that you're going with, partners that you're going with, whoever it is. There's things about SIM cards and bank accounts and your tax file number and health insurance. It's all in that info pack. So it's really a great tool, and we really recommend using it. Amazing. So all of this sounds great. You're ready to start this process. How is this going to work? How does ANZ UK help you through it all? So that initial call is going to be key. We do usually recommend that you speak with us between 6 to 12 months before you want to go over to Australia. That's kind of the prime time to be speaking with our team. And it would be most likely myself or Ella or one of our other team members as well. we're going to go through your qualifications, your plans. Nothing has to be set in stone. We can also help figure out what is best for you. And we'll kind of go from there based off of what your preferences are at the end of the day. After that initial call, you'll also get all of those resources that we talked about. But once you do have your the visa granted, or you know which visa you're going to be going on, at that point, we can also pass your details on to the team in Australia so that they can support you from that end with another conversation more specifically about what to expect when you actually get there. So any paperwork you need to bring in, or any kind of locations that they recommend you look for accommodation in. They are also going to schedule you to have an in-person meeting so that when you do get to Australia, you can actually come into the office and say hello and have everything kind of sorted that way as well. On the compliance side of things, that's also going to be your global consultant, so it would still be myself or Ella. That's going to be things like making sure that you are ready for your state registration application and any questions that you have with that one, as well as doing your reference checks. So we send out our own online forms for those to make sure that it is all Australia compliant. So we just need to get those done before you head off. In terms of next steps after that, you are going to obviously book those flights, get that registration submitted, and get on the plane. That is always key. If you want to go traveling first, that is fantastic. If you want to head straight there, even better. We're there to support you all the way up until you get to Australia and beyond. Once you are cleared for work, you've gone into the office locally, your references are done, your registration is back, we are going to be able to get you into the classroom as soon as we can. And I did mention earlier, 3 to 6 months is the prime window to speak with us and get this process started. If you're going in 2 weeks, still give us a call. We'll still help you. But obviously, the earlier, the better.
And for my personal favorite part is follow us on social media. Even if you're not sure that you're ready to go or you're still on the fence, give us a follow on social media. What you'll find on our social media accounts is a lot of information and strategies for just your daily classroom stuff. You know, working here in Ireland, you can still get a lot of support and interesting information. I know our marketing team loves a funny TikTok, so you will see plenty of them, and you'll also be able to get in contact with them should you need, if you've got any questions. It's the same reason why I've got up my Journey to Remember account, which is my specific work-based account that is there for you guys if you want to chat with someone but you don't want to message a main account. Because if you're anything like me, I hate messaging business accounts, even if I know the business. So I've set this one up so that you guys can just have a chat with me. And, you know, if you want to just go through things, you've got questions, but you're not quite ready for that call yet, that's not a problem either. We're happy to help. We do mean this literally any point in your journey. So whatever point you are needing help from us, we are here to support. And social media is a great way to keep connected and just see what's going on, see if this is the journey for you.
Fantastic, yeah. Amazing. So we'll kind of wrap things up there. We do appreciate you guys coming out this evening and learning more about Australia. If you do have any questions at this point, please do feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll kind of go through them as we go here. I'm going to stop sharing just because I can't actually see the chat when I am sharing, so we'll end that there. But if you don't have any questions, we do really appreciate you coming along. We will be sending this out via like a recording by email tomorrow. So you will be able to kind of double check all this information along with our booking links, so that if you do want to speak with us, you have the option to book in with myself or with Ella. I'm actually going to be in Melbourne for the first 3 weeks of March, so it might be Ella that you're speaking with. So very excited to be making that journey myself, but I'll come back and tell you all about it if you want to book in then.
Yes, I can see. Oh, I think Jamie's just had a question pop in there. So just in regards to term time, if we have graduation in the middle of a term time, say October, could we arrive after that date?
Yes, absolutely. I've actually spoken with a few educators this week who are graduating in June, but their degree doesn't come back until November. Sometimes you can try and fast track that as well. Speak with the university to see if they can give you your actual diploma before then. Otherwise, if you are graduating in October and you want to come out as soon as that paperwork is back, please do feel free to do so. Just be aware that your processing time for the application might be impacted by that. So if you don't actually have documents in hand until the middle of October, then you might not be able to submit your application until the middle of October, and it might not be granted until December, maybe even January, depending on where you're going. Are there any opportunities to complete your regional work in Sydney? Great question. I would say look just a little outside of Sydney. Sydney probably doesn't have much available there itself. They are kind of very intentional with the word regional. They do like it to be outside of the city. So anything that is tourism, that is hospitality or farm work in a rural community is what they're really going for. The guide to extending your working rights does have more information and kind of resources and links to websites that way, but they essentially have to be an approved regional work provider.
That's not to say that it doesn't have to be something like we say, it doesn't have to be boring. For some people, fruit picking might be boring. For me, it's not maybe my cup of tea. I know that I've heard of people working in 5-star resorts. I've heard of people scuba diving, being tour guides. So there are so many different opportunities. So don't get too worried about it. There are definitely a lot of opportunities to suit whatever your interests are as well. That's the beauty of it these days.
I mean, we've had educators even go and do their regional work up the coast. They've done it even though they had UK passports, just because they wanted that rite of passage. But you can use it to see all of Australia, really get out and see more of the country, which is fantastic as well. Would you get time off school for that regional work, which is a really great question. We usually recommend, I should have actually said this during the calendar section as well, great question. The best time of year to do your regional work is over the Australian summer months. So like we were saying, the end of the academic year in kind of late November, early December is pretty quiet. The beginning of the academic year in February is also pretty quiet. So if you want to go off and do your regional work during those times, there's not going to be any teaching available throughout January or the late December. So it's a fantastic time to make a really good start on your regional work. There's also those 2-week term breaks between every term that you could go off and get a bit of it done. But the summer months is really when you're going to want to take advantage of your time off of work. If you are going for contract opportunities as well, a lot of the time the school might bring you on for 6 months, so within your working holiday visa rights. And then they might say, right, rather than getting you another 6-month contract, we're going to let you have a bit of casual work and go off and do your regional work whenever you want to do it during those 6 months. Awesome. Can see maybe one more question coming up. No, maybe not. Okay.
Oh,
there we go. The bubbles are back. I will say as well, we can always go over this and your specific plans more in that call. This is why we're here, is just talk all of this through. All of our services are free. That conversation is free. We're going to help you out this whole way. So we'll always be on the side of things to be able to provide that support as well. Can you apply for a skilled visa at the end of your second year on a working holiday visa? Yes. And I would say do it sooner than you think. If you go out there for the year and you did your regional work and you're staying for the second year and you know that you love it, you're kind of getting that idea of staying beyond the second year, apply for your skilled worker visa straight away. It can take between 6 to 12 months, just depending on the time of year, on how busy it is. So if you apply a little bit earlier, you're more likely to have it granted before your working holiday visa does come to an end. The prices for visas, I can say the working holiday visa is 635 Australian dollars to apply, which is, I want to say, around 400 euro, a little bit over that, 450. Skilled worker visas do fluctuate, but we actually are going to have a Australian work visa options webinar in April on the 9th, which we will send you the link for in our post email here. More than welcome to come along to that one. It has the migration agents from Visa Go Australia on there as well. So they're going to be able to answer all those questions. They're going to provide all the information about the different types of skilled visas, processing times, cost, all of it. Amazing. Fantastic. Well, we will probably leave it there, but thank you so much again for joining us. And we will send this email out to you with all of the links and everything probably tomorrow. But we are so appreciative of you joining on, and enjoy the rest of your half-term break. I hope you have a lovely, relaxing long weekend.
Thank you so much for joining us, guys.